was no surprise that Mr. Peters would follow his father's footsteps and enlist in the Air Force. He served from 1966 to 1968 at Colorado Springs, Colorado. He continued then to serve his community as a teacher at Huron High School from 1977 to 2005. Mr. Peters is married with 2 children and 4 amazing grandchildren. Would you please help me in welcoming back Huron's own Mr. Steve Peters.
Thanks. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to be back here. I told Mr. Nelson this is the first time I've spoken from up here that I didn't have to lean on my homeroom really hard to behave themselves while I was up here on the stage, so this is even more enjoyable than it used to be. I'd like to start out today's speech with a quote that I had up on my classroom wall probably for the entire time that I was a classroom teacher. And it was taken from an old hippie, a guy named Abby Hoffman, who was fairly active in a lot of things that we might not think of as being particularly patriotic, but it's about democracy. And he said, democracy is not something you believe. It's not something that you think about. It's something that you do. You participate. And if we ever cease to do that, democracy will cease to exist. My history, as Mr. Nelson said, was as a military kid. And this field feeds tremendously into what I feel about Veterans Day, because the guys that I grew up around were my dad and his buddies and the guys who were in his squadron and stuff like that. So I'm just going to give you a few kind of little vignettes from my life that I remember. When I was in 2nd grade, we moved from Hamilton Air Force Base to the city of Novato, California, because my dad was gone for a year. He was on what was called a TDY hardship assignment. He went to Labrador and he flew F-89s at Labrador as part of the distant early warning system, so the Russians didn't sneak attack us over the Arctic Circle. And so we were without a dad there for about 12 months. That kind of thing wasn't uncommon. It wasn't uncommon. When Dad got back from Labrador, we transferred to Edwards Air Force Base. Edwards Air Force Base was a really cool place. It was a flight test center for the United States. And there were all these really cool people and all these really cool aircraft that were going on. But there were some problems that occurred with that. One of my memories from 3rd grade, after we were at Edwards Air Force Base, was hearing this just horrid sound, and I don't know if I can do it for you, but I'm going to try it. I tried it 15 years ago, and I'll try it again now. And it sounded something like this. And all the 3rd graders, we knew what it was. We ran over to the window of Miss Davidson's class, and we looked. And here's this trail of black and brown smoke going up, and somebody had augured in. And now, as 3rd graders, we're trying to figure out whose dad is flying that day. You see, the military service is not just about combat. The military service is about day-to-day, in the same way that your teachers come to school and your folks go to work, strapping it on and putting yourself on the line because you believe that the democratic process needs to continue. And you believe that unless somebody stands there at the gates against whatever barbarians are out there this generation, that may not continue. It wasn't my dad who augured in. It wasn't anybody from my class, as it turned out that time. But during 4th grade, right before Christmas, we lost Bob Williams, who was our neighbor to the left, when he did go in with a B-57 that he was test flying. And then later that next summer, between 4th and 5th grade year, we lost Bill Lake. Both these guys were combat veterans. Both had flown in World War II and Korea. And they lost their lives serving during peacetime because they were flying experimental aircraft. They were the guys that were out there on the cutting edge. For that reason, way more than the fact that I served my time, I have tremendous affection and respect for the men and women who serve in the armed forces, and for the veterans who have served in the armed forces. I was talking with my dad about a year, I guess about 4 months before I first gave a Veterans Day speech. It was the summer of '95. And he's retired now, he lives in Palm Springs, he plays golf a lot, and he's having a really good life. And the military allowed him to do that because he grew up dirt poor in Los Angeles during the Depression. And the military allowed him to move from the very lowest of social economic classes to living in Palm Springs. But it wasn't a freebie. He gave the United States of America 25 years of his life where he was on constant call and where he put himself in harm's way many times as a combat aviator. And the conversation went something like this. It's summer of '95, and we're playing golf, and my dad says to me, he said, I got some of my buddies here who are retired businessmen, and they are giving me grief about my benefits as a retired military man. Now, one of the first things, I'm going to digress for just a moment. One of the first things Mr. Nelsick did when he became my boss was he called me in and he said to me, Pete, I like the way you do things, but you got to try not to swear so much. And I said to him, Terry, I will try to get better. In keeping with that promise to you, I shan't say what I said when my dad told me this, but the gist of it was, how dare they? They built their businesses. They built their fortune. They made it good in the American business place on the backs of the men and the women like yourself, Dad, who put their fannies on the line. How dare they? And I said, for God's sakes, if we see one of them out here, don't point him out to me. Because I was 15 years younger then and kind of scrappy instead of a polite old fellow like I am now. I think we need to be reminded many times, especially in this election season, that our military protects not a party or an individual in power, but our way of life. They protect the Constitution. They protect the rights of the citizens. By great good fortune, this is an election year. And by great good fortune, Veterans Day and an election day are very close together. We, as a people, are able to vote because people of all races, sexes, all religious persuasions have been willing to serve, to put their lives on the line and keep the barbarians from the gates. Many times, even when they were not in agreement with political officials. Because you see, whether it's Vietnam or the Spanish-American War or the Civil War or the conflicts now, it's not about serving political leaders. It's about serving the people of the United States. It's about keeping our people safe. It's about serving the Constitution so that we can go about living in a democratic society, having elections, and having peaceful transfers of power, if that's what the people want, not because some demagogue has tried to take over the military. That's what it's about, folks. There's a great line in A Few Good Men that Demi Moore gets to speak. She and Tom Cruise play JAG officials who are defending two Marines. And Tom Cruise says to her, "Why do you care so much?" And I think it sums up how I feel, not just on Veterans Day, but every day. She said, "I care because they make me feel safe. They stand on the ramparts and they say, 'Sleep tight tonight. Nothing bad will happen on my watch.'" That's why I think we need to honor. We should honor, and we must continue to honor, not only the serving military right now, but also the men and the women who over the years have been willing to say, "It's my time." As Mr. Nelsick said, I enlisted in the Air Force pretty much because it was the family business. When I got out of the Air Force, I went to college. After I got out of college, I started teaching and coaching. I am proud of my service. I don't for a moment think that I, in any way, was a warrior that my dad was. Although I think the communists made no great inroads in Colorado Springs while I was stationed there. I never served in a combat unit. But the point is, I guess, as we look at what Veterans Day is about, to go back to Abby Hoffman's definition once more. You participate. You take part. And the people who allow us to participate and allow us to take part and allow us to keep democracy running are the men and women who are currently serving in uniform and the men and women who have been willing, as Demi Moore said, to stand on that battlement every night and say, "Nothing bad will happen on my watch. Sleep tight tonight, America." For that reason, I thank all of the veterans for their service and their commitment. And I thank you for giving me a chance to come in and talk to you. Thanks a bunch.